Hey, hi, welcome to your Unit 4 set of videos. Make sure you know exactly what to do for this set, and have a great day. Alrighty, my friends, let's go ahead and get started here with your video number 6, looking at motives for exploration. So why would people even want to explore out and about? So what are our objectives? What are we going to get out of this? Number 1, why would anyone want to explore right after a time of death and destruction? If you remember back, we left off with Europe and essentially the entire old quote unquote world. So Europe and Central Asia, Northern Africa, and then Asia itself was being devastated by the bubonic plague, right? And then we kind of learned a little bit about how humans try to get out of that situation through the Renaissance and through this rebirth of culture, of medicine, and trying to kind of get away from not science, of religion as being the dominant explanation for everything and starting to rely on science now. So why would people want to do that? What were some of the goodies that were received from exploration, as well as who is the leading country to start this movement, and why did they even want to do that? So let's go ahead and get started here with our motives for exploration. Oh my goodness. So when you're looking at exploration, it really was between the time periods of 1400s to the 1800s, and we are starting in the 1400s here. European mariners embarked on a series of exploratory voyages. This cost obviously a bunch of money, so not the everyday average person could afford this. So because it was so costly, a lot of private investors as well as government authorities were the ones initiating this, but also they're the ones that had one of the strongest motives to do this, because they had to ensure that these voyages were successful, because otherwise their money was going out the window, right? And a successful voyage was essentially either something new or unknown, or perhaps something that could be definitely applied to their country during that time. It enabled European mariners or sailors to chart the world's oceans and develop a very accurate understanding of world geography. And understanding your world, especially back then, was incredible. You had to understand where you were, because to them, they felt like they really did not understand what was going on. And the main reasons to go out and explore was to establish this global network, which is another reason why private investors as well as government authorities really wanted to give in so much of their money, was to create these global networks, right, of communication, transportation, as well as exchange. Okay. Also, I apologize for my speech. I don't know why it's doing that right now. So let's look at, well, why should you go travel, right? Why should you explore? What's the point? What's the aim? I would say for the modern 21st century, one of the reasons why you should go out and explore and travel the world is just to get out of your house, to go out and really see the world for your own eyes, as opposed to just like on a screen. And back then, it's kind of the same thinking, except they didn't have screens. But there's a billion different reasons why humans were wanting to start to explore during the 1400s. But the main number one reason is everything that I have listed here for you. And I know it's more than one, but it's the same topic, essentially. So to search for basic resources, right? Where can you find a better wood, better, places to have your livestock, perhaps a new species of meat to consume, etc. searching for land for cultivation, specifically of cash crops. And cash crops are specifically designed crops to sell, right? Some primary examples would be cotton right over here. You got some sugar cane right over there. Tobacco, super duper popular, especially in North America. Cotton, popular in North America. Sugar, and our last picture here is coffee beans, was incredibly popular in Africa as well as South America. So you got to look for some land to get some more money. And next, you have the desire to establish new trade routes, once again, specifically to Asia, specifically to India. And then lastly, the aspiration to expand the influence of Christianity, which was the dominant religion in Europe during this time. So let's start off with the first country to really kick things off and to start wanting to full-time explore. And remember, this is the European country, not any other Asian, Oceanic, or Middle Eastern country, because, one of the first explorers were the Asians, right? Were specifically China and Japan. And then you have a bunch of Muslim mariners as well, going, did I say marinera? Mariners to go out and travel by sea. And Europe was so behind. So just wanted to clear that up and make sure you understood that, okay? So we're starting off with the first European country to explore, which was Portugal. And this right here, this arrow points to that tiny, small kingdom that actually made a pretty big impact for the rest of human course. They were relatively poor, and as I mentioned, they were a very small kingdom. They were mainly searching for fresh resources to try to exploit, as well as lands to cultivate, whether it's for cash crops, definitely a huge bonus, but also to expand their empire because they were, pretty tiny. They began this process during the 13th century, so the 1200s actually, and they were specifically just looking all throughout the Atlantic Ocean, but they did slowly go into the Indian Ocean as well, but they mainly started in the Atlantic. They originally sought fish, whales, timber, and lands to grow their wheat. Then as the 15th century started to come out, right, the 1400s, sugar was in such high demand. And so they were looking for lands to use as cash crops. One of their biggest lands they're going to conquer is what is present-day Brazil. But more on that later. So the luring of trade, right? We've already been looking at trade almost all of first semester. So you already know why trade is so incredibly important back then and to this day, right? It's still important today. And once again, it was incredibly desirable to trade with Asian markets, specifically with India. Why? Because of sugar, spices, and everything nice, right? During the age of the Mongolian Empire, when the Mongolians were in control, and as you learned, traveling during that time was incredibly safe and efficient to do overland, especially. And during this time, European merchants often traveled overland as far as China to trade various goods. But when the Mongolian Empire collapsed and the spread of the bubonic plague started to creep all throughout, traveling on the Silk Roads was incredibly dangerous, not only to your personal health, but your life was also in danger. So what was that solution? It was maritime trade, right? Seafaring trade. And it got you the big bucks there. Also, African trade was incredibly desirable during this time, well, specifically the 12th century, which was the 1100s. And the most desirable commodity was gold, right? Gold was incredibly prevalent in Africa, and then Europeans would slowly have to move into Central and Southern America for that. And then lastly, our last motivation is missionary efforts. And we're going to be focusing on this not all the time, but once again, religion is incredibly powerful. So yes, we will be mentioning religion a lot in this class, in this semester as well. But let's go ahead and look at missionary efforts, right? So goal of expanding the boundaries of Christianity. And this is not a new thing, right? There have been other missionary religions that we've looked at in this class, right? Buddhism, and we saw how Buddhism really expanded all throughout India and then going into China as well. That's a missionary religion. Islam is also a missionary religion. It started right in present-day Middle East, and then it slowly creeped through Africa and as well as Spain, right, into Europe. So that's also a missionary religion. So Christianity, it's not really a new concept to try to grab converts, but that's what the goals of the top officials in all of Christianity, but I would say primarily the Roman Catholic Church during this time. And the missionary efforts were mostly peaceful, but it wasn't all peaceful, okay? So a primary example of it being mostly peaceful was during the Mongolian Empire, where Christian missionaries were able to travel along the Silk Roads because it was incredibly protected. And because of that, they were able to travel as far as India, Central Asia, as well as China in search of those converts. And yes, there were little mini pockets of Christians forming in those areas, which is why they're not, these modern day areas are not primarily Christian, but you still have those lingering effects because of this time period, which is pretty cool. But missionary efforts by the Christians were sometimes violent. And the primary example were the Crusades, which we've looked at before, right? That was a violent effort for European Christians to convert the Palestinian area from Muslim dominant to Christian dominant. They were only successful once, and then the rest of them, they were not successful. Also, during this time, a lot of Christians were feeling the amp of trying to fight for God to the point where they would be slaughtering other humans, other Christians. And mostly during this time, especially going towards the First and Second Crusade, a lot of Jews in Europe were being killed by these Christian crusaders as well. So it wasn't all happy, wonderful times. And it's important to acknowledge that for sure. There's an area specifically, Iberia, that was especially affected by these Christian missionary efforts, where you have a kingdom of Granada, which was Muslim, and it fell hard to the Spanish Christian forces just before Christopher Columbus was out to set sail on his first voyage. Some scholars think that that could have been one of the reasons why Christopher Columbus wanted to set sail as soon as possible. Obviously, it's not the only reason, but there's a lot of speculation of like, hey, this could be one of the reasons was because he felt fearful of what this new Christian converts were doing to his country. Looking at an example of motives, another one, I want to specifically look at this individual right here, Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese sailor. So when he went off to reach the Indian port of Calicut in 1498, the local authorities, they stopped him and asked him, "What do you want?" And his response was, "Mwah, summary of this unit." Christians and spices. That was his response. That is why he was there. And I would say that is the main thing that you should get out of this video, right? The goal of spreading Christianity became so powerful that it became a justification and a reinforcement for the more material motives for voyages of exploration. And that is where we're going to end it for today. So really quickly, what do we learn as a mini recap? Various motives for exploration combined and reinforced each other, right? Portugal was the primary empire just starting exploring just because of their general geography and what they needed in order to adapt and maintain their status as a kingdom. And then lastly, the main reasons for exploration are resources, land, and religion. Keep that in mind as we kind of finish and wrap up our unit here. Those are going to be your best 3 words as we get going. Now that you're done with that video, once again, make sure you know exactly what you need to do for this, and I'll see you next time.